Welcome to Empyrion Galactic Survival, and in this video we are going to be talking about the Alpha 11.5 update, which was released on the 12th of December 2019 if you're watching this in the future. And in the release notes, the devs said this is going to be the last update of 2019, which is understandable because they're just about to go on their Christmas holidays. And more interestingly, at the bottom they said that they are already thinking about and planning for Alpha 12. So I think that's a clear indication that this will probably be the last Alpha 11 update, and in the new year we will be having Alpha 12, which I think is pretty good, and I'm actually looking forward to Alpha 12. But at the same time, based on this update, I'm kind of wondering exactly what will be in Alpha 12, because there's a couple of things which I was expecting that we would have to wait for the Alpha 12 update before it was actually delivered. Now, I'm aware that this update is fairly substantial. It's got quite a lot of changes, quite a lot of bug fixes. In this video, I'm only going to go over the top level. For any of you who want to see the real detail, I will put a link in the video description, which will take you to the full breakdown of the update. So we might as well get straight into it. And the one I want to talk about first is probably the one that's going to have the biggest impact, especially if you are playing with CPU. So if I come down here and show you the advanced constructor, I had to put this in specifically in order to make this video. And if we come into here in the templates, you will see now that we can now make the optronic bridges and the optronic matrices. I think this is quite a big request from the community when Alpha 11 came out, when they said we would have to run around and try and find these. And I think this is going to be quite a big step forward with the perspective of working with CPU and upgrading ships, but it does come a little bit of a sting in the tail. This isn't going to be no quick shortcut, and I think the way they've done it is made it so that finding these out in the world in loot boxes is going to be a big step. And if I kind of take you through the progression, you can see the small optronics bridge needs gold, and I think this is quite an interesting introduction as well, because gold up until now was we needed 1 ingot to make an EVA suit if you didn't happen to find one on loot, and then it was just used for gold coins. But now, as you can see here, you're going to need 15 gold ingots. Now gold is a relatively rare resource in the game, so finding the gold ore or the gold ingots is going to be quite a valuable asset, and you're going to need 15 of those to even make the small optronics bridge. But then quite importantly, below that you will see you need 125 electronics. Now if I come up to electronics here, you will see that that means that you're talking 250 copper ingots, 125 silicon. So that's going to be quite a big step. And then of course over here you're going to need the 20 oscillators. So that's what 100 neodymium, 40 cobalt, 40 sathium, and that's just to make one of these. Now bear in mind, to make a large optronics bridge you've then got to do something similar with oscillators but with zirconium alloy, but you've actually got to make a small optronics bridge as well, and it's roughly the same also for the small matrix, although this is a little bit lighter as you can see here. So it's so if you're going to be into upgrading your bases, that might be a little bit easier. And just to kind of put that into a bit more context, if we go into the workshop here, you can see I've got this T3 transport called a Ferro, and you can see that to get this T3 ship in from the factory, you're going to need 4 small optronic bridges. I mean, that gives you an idea of how much level you're going to go. I don't think you're going to need, you don't need it for tier 2, tier 3. I don't think there's a tier 4 actually in here. And then if you actually go to, if we switch to capital vessels, you can see you're going to need 4 large optronic bridges. So if you imagine that means you're going to have to make 4 small ones, 4 large ones. So that is going to be quite a heavy investment in resources for anyone wanting to build these ships. And I think in some ways it will give a sense of progression to the game, because it means that you won't be able to come in and play for a couple of hours unless you're incredibly lucky and gather the resources to get these high level ships very early in the game. So I think that's the first step over and done with. Now the next thing I want to talk about is actually right in front of our eyes here. Now you will see that what they've actually been doing is I'm on the option for the what's it called? I can't remember now. The stock. And what they've actually done is they've been adding more stock ships to the game. If we come here and start with the bases, you can see there's a slightly more range of bases, and more importantly, we've got some choice of hover vehicles. I mean, some of them I've only had a very quick look through, but some of them are actually the existing stock ships which have been fixed for CPU, and you've also got the small vessels here. I mean, there's quite a nice range of small vessels. I mean, I haven't gone through them all, and I probably will do one day in creative mode. And then moving on, and we got a slightly wider range of capital vessels as well. And I mean, there's a tier 4 one there. Look at that! Wow. Now that would be an interesting one to build, an MS Titan. But look at that, 8 large optronic box bridges and the 4 large optronic matrices. That could be interesting. But so that's another change, and I think this is more from the perspective of new players, because most people who've been playing the game for some time tend to use their favourites from the workshop. But I think from the point of view of new players, they've got a fairly good range now of ships that they can actually experiment with and work towards if they should need to, well, if they're inclined to actually get one from the workshop, which I think truthfully most new players tend to do, because the building in this game can be a little bit of a challenge. Moving on to probably the next one that was a little bit controversial when the Alpha 11 first came out, and that is that there is a new galaxy map, and they've actually put it back in again. I think they've worked a bit more on the controls now. It now works a little bit more in a way similar to the old map does, and I think more importantly, if you actually come up here, we've now actually got a help indicator, which I think would be very, very useful for new players and also for existing players to actually get a feel for what's around. And where before you had to kind of try and guess what the symbols are, there's now quite a clear definition of what you can actually do, the distances, wormholes. What you've actually got is map and camera controls, which I think is quite useful. So it actually gives you, we can actually use the move around using the WASD keys as well. Although to be honest, I will probably tend to carry on using this. And you can see also here, you can actually now set that. I don't think we can actually set a target. We can, okay. So it's actually set a target. And I think from the perspective of a Project Eden scenario, being able to keep track of where you are and where you're going is going to be quite useful. And I actually quite like the way that's actually moving forward. So I may actually convert to the map. Now there is a section here that says additional sector and playfield info. It says structure type denied. You cannot enter this playfield with or spawn a blueprint in the area. So that's a restriction, I think, which is also currently working in Project Eden. There's max CPU tier allowed. So they will be able to put limits on the CPU that will be arise. Origin allowed. You can only enter the playfield when you're a member of a given origin. So again, this is very much information that will play into scenarios and multiplayer. And the next change is something I can only talk about, and that says that the default random scenarios will have up to 6 systems. So they've obviously made a change. I haven't actually tested that. So if any of you have taken a look at that, feel free to check it in the comments. But I think that again is laying the foundation for the multiple galaxies, which probably will be developed more in Alpha 12. Now the next one is quite interesting, and probably the best way to show it is that the multi-tool now has the ability to downgrade. Now it doesn't seem to be universal. Let me just see if I can find an area here. I mean, it works the same way as the upgrade tool. The way it works is that when you downgrade something, I'm not going to downgrade something, you need the resource, because this is a steel block. Now below me, if I come here and if I show you the upgrade tool, you'll see that these are carbon substrate blocks. So the upgrade tool says that you need 10 steel plates and get back 2 carbon substrate. And if I now go to the downgrade tool, that reverses the process. And I mean, to be honest, I'm not exactly too sure how this will benefit in game, but I can see it being quite useful if you are just trying to balance something for CPU purposes. I suppose in some ways you could be a bit cheeky if you needed to recover resources quickly. So, for example, say you needed a few hardened steel plates or something from an armored area, or some steel plates. You could come in here, put some carbon substrate in, and pull the steel plates out. It'll be quite interesting to see how this is actually going to work. I'm just going to try it on my ship. Yeah. So yeah, so you can. So again, I suppose it does work in the sense that if I was building this ship and I went over the CPU by putting in an armored cockpit and I wanted to reduce it, then I could go in there. I'm not going to do it because that's my one and only core ship at the moment. So that is an interesting and unexpected. The next one, again, is quite a small change, but I think it's going to be welcomed by the community overall, and that is that HV drills, and I think just the manual drills and the laser drills, will work in space. So I think this is another example of the developers taking on board the complaints that you can use a hover vehicle in space, but you can't actually use the mining drills. And I can see some fairly creative solutions for that. I mean, one that's kind of springs to mind for me is that if you had a hover vehicle and you had a ship with a cargo door, if you could back up close enough to an asteroid, you could effectively use the hover vehicle to mine an asteroid by moving it out onto a platform and then effectively just moving the ship forward. So interesting concept. But what I am going to do is talk about a couple of minor ones that caught my attention whilst I was actually going through the update notes. One of them is, I think, going to be a bit of a boon for players who want to start in full survival mode. Is the portable constructor is now unlocked by default. Originally it was a tier 5, if I remember correctly, which made surviving at the higher levels pretty interesting. So it now means that you can actually get the portable constructor straight out of the box. No more having to run around trying to kill things with the survival tool to get to level 5. Again, it's a small change, but it will make a reasonable difference to the gameplay. Now the next one the next one I can't actually show you. They've actually obviously taken on some feedback related to the pentaxid tank, because if any of you use shields, you'll be aware that all ships only can take one pentaxid tank. So what they've actually done is they've increased the capacity to 500 so that you can get more charge into when you're fighting and you're using the shield, so you won't have to keep maybe coming back and refueling. But that does come at a slight cost, in the sense that they've actually increased the CPU value by a couple of hundred. And finally, they've made some changes to the small constructor, and by adding the O2 station, the ammo box, and the food processor and sentry guns. So when you're actually laying out your initial base, I think that's going to make life a little bit easier, because you'll be able to get some basic facilities in, and probably more importantly sentry guns in, to get some light defenses without actually having to rush for the large constructor. So that, I think, will be useful as, again, for the initial survival phase of the game. And I think that is about it for the update. As I say, there are a lot more other minor changes, and I think that about finishes it for this video. As I say, if you're interested in more detail, there are a lot more bug fixes and minor changes listed in the change notes, so feel free to follow the link and go check those out if you've got a specific bug or which you want to take a look at. But until next time, whatever you do, enjoy your gaming.